Hello, Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. We are back. It's been a while since we last spoke, and unfortunately, I wish I had better news. I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about by now. You probably even read the title of the video, so no surprise, the Toronto Raptors are picking 9th in this year's draft. So this is the worst likely outcome. There was one even worse outcome where if they get triple jumped, where 3 teams behind them jumped into the top 4, but that was only about a 1% chance. The chance that they pick 9th was 12%, which is, unlikely, but still within the realm of possibility. And unfortunately, the Toronto Raptors ended up with the 9th pick. And so it is not a great outcome. Obviously, I would have liked it if the Toronto Raptors were able to jump into the top 4, but alas, that's not the world that we live in, and we're just going to have to, pick up the scraps that the other teams leave behind. And although it is not really an outcome I wanted to see, it does make this episode a little bit more interesting because there's a lot of possibilities. And so what I want to do is I want to take a look at all of the different possibilities that could happen on draft day. I'm going to look at all of the teams ahead of the Raptors, what they are going to be looking at, and then trying to read the tea leaves and figure out who will be available for the Toronto Raptors to draft when they are on the clock at 9. So let's start it off. So first of all, let's just talk about who, moved up. So number 1 overall is the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, this does not help any kind of conspiracy theory about the league. This is just so suspicious. And while, they're audited. This is all done under a third party where they're there in the room to make sure that no, funny business is going on. So it's not rigged, in my opinion. But the Mavericks made the most suspicious trade of all time. They traded Luka Doncic to the biggest market in the NBA, and they didn't get much in return. But lo and behold, look, they're picking number 1 overall, and they get to pick Cooper Flagg. So I think it's just really rewarding incompetence. I hate it. I guess it's maybe slightly better than the 2nd pick in this year's draft, who also moved up, the San Antonio Spurs. If they were able to pair Wembanyama with Cooper Flagg, it's just over for the league. Those 2 of the best prospects I have seen in the past couple of decades, like literally 2 of the best prospects ever on the same team. So that would have just been game over. Then the Sixers, I was hoping that they'd lose their pick because I'm not a huge fan of their franchise, but they moved into the top 3 as well. And then, I'm sorry to all the Hornets, Jazz, Wizards fans who, tanked the whole year and had to deal with all of these rebuilding rosters. They got bumped all down, 4, 5, 6. And so that's, tough luck. I guess that's why, tanking isn't a, ideal strategy. It's why perhaps maybe people who were tearing their hair out that the Raptors weren't tanking as hard as they possibly could. Look at what happened to those guys, even though they are picking ahead of the Raptors. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. 4, 5, 6 is a little bit better than 9. With that said, we're going to take a look at the draft order and what the team needs are and who the teams are, probably going to be thinking about come draft night. So we'll just start off with the Dallas Mavericks. They're picking number 1 overall, and this is a no-brainer. They're going to be picking Cooper Flagg 100%. Cooper Flagg is one of the best prospects I have seen. He's definitely, I think Wembanyama's ahead of him. There are guys like LeBron James, who was a better prospect coming out of high school. You could make the argument for a couple of other players, but Cooper Flagg is one of the best prospects I have seen, and there's just no doubt about it. He's going to the Mavericks, so let's not waste any more time. Now, next up is the San Antonio Spurs. So Dylan Harper, I like him a lot. I think that he would be number 1 overall in almost any other draft class. I think he's just a really solid, high ceiling, high floor guy who is a prototypical NBA lead ball handler. And unfortunately for the Spurs, they have some guys like that. Well, they have one guy like that, and then they've got another guy. Not exactly sure how he's going to develop, but I really like Stephon Castle a lot. and he's kind of a guard player. I'm not exactly sure what his role is going to be moving forward, but he's similar size to Dylan Harper, so you got to take that into account. But they also have De'Aaron Fox, and they made a big splash. They acquired him from the Kings, and it looks like he's going to be, they're starting lead ball handler moving forward. And I think they're going to try and hit the gas pedal and go this next season, because Victor Wembanyama is already emerging as one of the best players in the league. I don't think it's wise to pussyfoot around here. I think it's time for them to start making hay while the sun shines. As Wembanyama gets older, you want him to have the experience of being in the playoffs. So I think that they're going to try and make a jump next season, which is an important point. I think that they will be willing to trade this pick. I don't know if Harper is the greatest fit. I mean, he's a great fit with Wembanyama, but I don't think he's a great fit with the guy that they just made a big deal for. Dylan Harper is a guy who would probably want to have the ball in his hands most of the time, and De'Aaron Fox is a guy like that as well. So I think that there's a distinct possibility they could trade this pick for an impact player. A lot of people have been talking about Giannis. They could maybe make a play for him. I think that number 2 overall is high enough that this is something that I could see happening. They might have to include, Stephon Castle in that deal, but, Giannis Antetokounmpo, one of the top 3 players in the world. So pairing him with Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox, you're going to immediately become one of the best teams in the league. So something to watch out for. With that said, I think there's a very outside chance that they might be interested in drafting Ace Bailey with this pick. I don't think it's likely. I think even if they kept the pick that they would pick Dylan Harper, but something to keep an eye out for. I think maybe like 5-10% chance that they pick Ace Bailey here. Next up is the Philadelphia 76ers, and they are picking third. There's a big drop off in quality. There are a couple of guys in this realm that could conceivably go 3rd overall. I think they're going to go with Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey has been ranked number 3 for most of the year. He's got some question marks around his game, whether he has the processing to, really read the game at the next level, how able he is to generate easy baskets for himself. But he is a forward with an amazing jump shot, and he has clearly a huge amount of upside. And I think that is the guy that they're going to be picking. So they could pick VJ Edgecombe or Trey Johnson at this spot. I think Trey Johnson's a little bit more likely than VJ Edgecombe because he can play in the off-ball spot, where the Sixers are very stacked at the guard spot. They've got Maxey, they've got Jared McCain. They've got that kind of sealed up. So I think that they're going to go with Ace Bailey. And that's my prediction here. It's possible they take Trey Johnson here, but I think Ace Bailey is the most likely. So I think that the Hornets are an interesting team at the 4 spot because the 2 best players who will probably be available to them are VJ Edgecombe and Trey Johnson. So they both have strengths and weaknesses, and they're both kind of shooting guards. So it really depends what the Hornets want. They have LaMelo Ball and they have Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller would fit with either VJ Edgecombe or Trey Johnson, but LaMelo Ball is a guy that you have to kind of think long and hard about. And I could see an argument for both Trey Johnson and VJ Edgecombe. Trey Johnson, I think, is a natural fit on offense. He's an off-ball guard who can really shoot it. That would make a lot of sense next to LaMelo Ball. You could have LaMelo Ball handle the ball like he likes to, make plays, and then Trey Johnson could roam the perimeter and, create his own shot, shoot the ball. That makes a lot of sense. I could also see them taking VJ Edgecombe. And VJ Edgecombe could play on the off-ball spot as well, but he's a really good defender, and that's one of LaMelo Ball's weaknesses. And that pairing could make sense because VJ Edgecombe could really play the disruptive defender role next to LaMelo Ball. So it's really about what they want. Are they going to think about defense? Are they going to think about offense? I think they're going to think about offense. I think they're going to take Trey Johnson. I think that's a pretty good pairing on offense there. So that's what I predict. I think that the Hornets will take Trey Johnson. Next up, I think the Jazz, this is all kind of moot. I think the Jazz are just going to take whoever falls. So if the Hornets take Trey Johnson, then the Jazz are going to take VJ Edgecombe. If the Hornets take VJ Edgecombe, I think that the Jazz will take Trey Johnson. I think that the Jazz need just talent, and their spots where they are weakest are at the kind of wing guard spots. They've got Markkanen, they've got Filipowski, they've got Walker Kessler. their front court's pretty squared away, so it's just an easy choice here. They're going to take whoever falls between Trey Johnson, VJ Edgecombe. So I think that they're going to be taking VJ Edgecombe here. I think he'll be, a nice fit next to that front court. So that's who I think they're going to take. So now we got the Wizards. The Wizards picked number 2 overall in last year's draft, and they picked up Alex Sarr, who I like as a prospect. I think he's got potential. They also got Bub Carrington, who I also think has potential. They're a very young team. And they also have Bilal Coulibaly. I think that they're building some nice stuff there. So I'm not exactly sure how attached they are to Jordan Poole. If they want to move off of Poole, he had a pretty decent end to the season, and I think that, they could move him if they wanted to. I don't think that contract looks as toxic as it did maybe at the end of last season and the beginning of this season, where he just looked abysmal. But after Kyle Kuzma was waived, the team made a lot more sense. Jordan Poole looks like he could be there long term, maybe not. The unfortunate thing for them is that there are a lot of guards in this draft range and a lot of centers. And I don't think that they want to draft another center after they picked up Alex Sarr. I think they're much more likely to take a guard here, even though they have Bub Carrington, even though they have Jordan Poole at the moment. I really think that they might be in the market for Jeremiah Fears. I think that he is a guy that they're going to be interested in. They could even play him off of the bench while Jordan Poole is there. I think that he has a lot of scoring chops. He's an alpha dog type of player. I think that that's a guy that they could be very interested in. Con Knippel, he's another guy who has been mocked, in the top half of the lottery this season. I think he's another potential pick there, but I think they might just try and go for the high upside pick in Fears rather than the safer pick in Knippel. Although Con Knippel would fit their team pretty well. He's a good shooter. He could play next to Bub Carrington. He could play next to Jordan Poole. He could play next to Bilal Coulibaly. He'd be a nice glue guy that could help run their offense. So I think those are the 2 picks there for them. I think Jeremiah Fears. I think Con Knippel. I don't think they're going to be drafting a center. I think there's an outside chance for a guy like Yakachonis. But I think if you're going to pick Yakachonis, I think you just go with Fears. I think that the upside there is a lot higher. Yeah, I think they're going to go with Fears, but I could see Con Knippel. Next up, the Pelicans. So the Pelicans are kind of at the mercy of the Washington Wizards. I think that they would draft Fears if he's available. They could use a guard upgrade. They want a guy who can handle the ball and put pressure on the rim. And they've been looking for that type of player for a long time. And they've made a bunch of trades to try and find that guy, but they really have not been able to successfully find a player who really fits the mold of an A1 creator. So I think if he drops to them, I think the Pelicans will just snatch up Fears, take him, and no doubt about it. If the Wizards take him, there's not a ton of replacements for Fears at that spot. They could take Yakachonis, who's another guard. He could be a guy that they try and develop. They could also take Con Knippel, because if the Wizards take Fears, then Knippel will drop to them. I think that there's a bit of overlap there with Trey Murphy. I think Trey Murphy is a great shooter, a really good wing. He can handle the ball a little bit as well and score. There's a lot of overlap there, but with that said, you can run a couple of those guys. So I could see them taking Con Knippel as well. But I think they're going to go big. And I know they have Yves Missy, and I don't know how, he did play a big role for them. He was one of the worst finishers in the league. So he's, there's some question marks about him. I don't think that him being on their team is going to prevent them from taking a center. So I could really see them taking Kamen Malawach here. There are 2 centers in this draft range, Derek Queen and Kamen Malawach. The problem with Derek Queen is that he is a scoring center. He's a guy that can, put pressure on the basket, score inside. He is not a good defender, and his rebounding is kind of suspect. So if you're trying to build around Zion Williamson, which I think they are, I think that that's kind of what they're going with. I think that Kamen Malawach would be the guy that you would want to pair with Zion Williamson, a guy who can really hold it down inside and, do the dirty work, play help defense when Zion Williamson gets blown past, and then Zion can just cook. And there's a little bit of stretch potential there as well with Kamen Malawach. So I think that if Fears drops to them, slam dunk, they're taking Jeremiah Fears. If he does not, I think they'll take Kamen Malawach. And then there's an outside chance, I think, of Con Knippel as well. If they just want to, if they are high on him, I think he would fit on pretty much any team that drafts him. Next up are the Nets. So this is the team that is drafting before the Toronto Raptors. And the Nets are kind of the most wide open team. Because Fears is gone, Fears and Cam Thomas are kind of similar players. Cam Thomas is a scoring guard who really likes to shoot and drive and handle the ball and score. So very similar players, but I believe, will be off the board before before they have a chance to get him. So it's kind of wide open for them. You can see them taking a lot of guys. They don't really have, a core, a really solid core like some of the other teams in this range. They're really just probably looking for the BPA. And in fact, because they don't really have a core, I think that they're going to try and get a guy who can put up some stats. And I really think that the guy that they might be the most interested in is Derek Queen. Derek Queen has a lot of weaknesses. He's not a good defender. His boxing out and intangibles on the defensive end and via rebounding on defense are all kind of questionable. But there is one thing he can do, which is score and play make. And he can do a bunch of different stuff on the offensive side of the ball. And if you're going to be a bad team, I think the Nets are going to be a bad team next year. Even if they make a couple of trades. Cam Johnson, I don't even know if he's going to be on their team next year. But I think that they'll be looking for a guy who can come in and immediately make an impact and not require a ton of stuff around him in order for him to make his game work. I don't think they're going to be looking for a complementary player. So if Con Knippel drops to them, I could see them taking Derek Queen over Con Knippel. Con Knippel, Common Malawach, if Common Malawach drops to them, so there's a chance there. I think that they would take Derek Queen over him as well. Common Malawach and Con Knippel, they're more complementary players. They're guys who sort of fit in rather than be a star kind of guy. So I think that they would go for Derek Queen. But I could also see them just seeing Con Knippel as the BPA, and they could try and pick him up as well. So that there's potential there. So that goes for the teams that are ahead of the Toronto Raptors. So let's talk about what the Raptors, might be looking for and who they could pick up in this draft. So first of all, I think that the Toronto Raptors will draft Common Malawach if he drops to them. So the Wizards kind of hold the key to the Toronto Raptors' future, because if they take Jeremiah Fears, then I think the Pelicans might take Common Malawach. If the Wizards take, say, Knippel, or, Yakachonis, or maybe even Queen, I think slam dunk, I think that the Pelicans are taking Jeremiah Fears, okay? So if Common Malawach drops past the Pelicans, I think the Nets are not going to take Common Malawach. I think he will just fall directly to the Toronto Raptors. So with that said, I think that, if the Wizards take somebody other than Jeremiah Fears, I think there's a good possibility that Common Malawach will drop all the way to the Raptors, and then they'll be able to pick him, and I think they will do that if it's available to them. One of my sleeper picks, one of the guys that I really liked, especially if the Raptors fell back, was Jace Richardson. But that was prior to reading his draft combine measurements. Jace Richardson had some pretty bad draft combine measurements. He was measured at 6 feet. Pretty small, not a great wingspan. So I think I'm a little lower on him. If he can't play the 2, or if he can't be a swing, if he's just nailed into that point guard role, not as interested. Con Knippel is another guy that could fall to the Toronto Raptors, so it's worth discussing him. So if, the Wizards take Fears, the Pelicans take Malawach, the Nets take Derek Queen, so those are all possibilities. Con Knippel could fall all the way to the Toronto Raptors. And I've discussed Con Knippel. I know there are a lot of people who are not as high on him, just because he doesn't have that superstar upside potential. But here's the pitch for him. The Toronto Raptors, I think, are going to be looking to make a push next season. They've made a bunch of trades. They have guys entering their prime. They need complementary players, and they need guys who can shoot. They need guys who can come in and contribute immediately. So I think Con Knippel could step in and play a lot of minutes for the Toronto Raptors off of the bench. And there is some positional overlap. So there's a guy right now on the Toronto Raptors, Grady Dick, who has, the rep of a shooter. He hasn't been a great shooter so far in his career. There's still potential there. I'm not writing him off completely, but I think if the Toronto Raptors drafted Con Knipple, I think you would probably see a trade involving Grady Dick. Just, swap one shooter wing for another. And I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think Con Knipple at this point, after seeing 2 seasons of Grady Dick, I would say that Con Knipple has higher upside than him. So yeah, I wouldn't be too upset with Con Knipple on the Toronto Raptors, but obviously it would probably require a few other trades. So that's if he drops to them. Outside of that, okay, so I think there's a really good chance that Yakachonis will drop to the Toronto Raptors at 9. I'm going to be honest, I was high on him at the beginning of the season, and then he really hit a wall, and against the higher level competition, he was not very good. His shot declined. He is a guy who can run the point. I could see him playing alongside Jamal Shed. I could see him playing alongside Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter. I think he could fit in, but again, I'm not as high on him. So, and the Raptors have a lot of guards and wings, and if I'm not super high on him, I'm not gonna be super pumped if the Raptors take him. After that, there's Derek Queen. I think the Raptors could take Derek Queen if they believe he's the BPA. He has a lot of defensive question marks. He could come off of the bench behind Yak and maybe just put up some stats. But I'm not a huge fan of that type of player, centers who aren't very good on defense. So I'm sort of similar Yakachonis boat there, not as big a fan of him. Now we're going to talk about the other picks at 9. So there are a couple of reaches, guys who are not projected in this range, who could, I could easily see the Toronto Raptors drafting at 9. There are 4 guys who are possibilities here. I like Colin Murray-Boyles. His combine stats weren't great. So he's 6'6", 6'7", standing reach of 8'10", which is pretty good. But he's a little undersized for the position, but I do like him. He can really play. He would make sense off of the bench for the Toronto Raptors, but he can't shoot. So there's him. There's Noah Essengay. Noah Essengay is a guy who's been mocked in the teens. He is a really toolsy wing forward who plays overseas for Ratio Farm Ulm in Germany. He's a pretty interesting player, has a lot of tools, could develop into, a prototypical wing forward in the NBA. Rasheer Fleming, his wingspan is for real. He was mentioning that he had a 7'5" wingspan. He's 6'8". With the 7'5" wingspan, that means I think he could play a little bit of center, and he's a good shooter. He's takes a lot of shots, and he shoots 39% from 3. So he could be like a premier role player that the Raptors could be interested in drafting. I think he could come in. He's a junior, so he's a little bit older, but that might mean that the Raptors could just plug him in at that backup 5 spot and have him play significant minutes. Having a stretch 5 next to Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram, that could make a lot of sense. I like him there. Another guy, Igor Demin, and a guy who I warmed up quite a bit on after watching him in the tournament. He is not a stats guy, so right now his stats are pretty poor. He's not a good shooter. He averages a lot of turnovers. His measurements at the draft combine were great. He is 6'8", with a 6'10" wingspan, 8'9" standing reach, and he's a point guard. So this might be the guy that is the high upside swing at 9, where, maybe he can't come in right away and contribute, but he is very Raptors-y. He has a high basketball IQ. He has excellent size for position. He's a good athlete, good foot speed. He knows how to play. I could see the Raptors taking him at 9. And then there's obviously a trade down scenario. I think that once you get to 9, and if, guys like Kamen Malawach or Con Knipple are off the board, then you could just go and get, one of those guys that I just mentioned, Colin Murray-Boyles, Igor Demin, Noah Essengay, Rasheer Fleming. I could see them going and getting one of those players at a later draft position. So it might behoove the Raptors to make a draft day trade, and they're very reticent. I can't even remember the last time they traded down or traded up in a draft. So it really comes down to what they want. I think that the Toronto Raptors, the only lock really that I have that I think I feel it and am pretty confident in, is that if Kamen Malawach were to make it to 9, I think that the Toronto Raptors would draft him. So that is my analysis of this year's draft. I have a whole ton of videos, scouting videos. Everyone I mentioned today, I have a video on, okay? The links will be in the description. You will be able to see it. Just open it up. It says more at the bottom. You click on that and there will be a whole list of videos that you can take a look at. I go in depth on all of the prospects that I mentioned today. And so I'd be very interested in hearing what you guys think. 9th is a very interesting position. It wasn't a great position for the Raptors to land in, but there are a lot of options. I think that the Toronto Raptors could really find, if their scouting is top-notch and they do a good job, I think they could find some real talent. I think that this is a really good draft. I think this is one of the best drafts in years, and there is talent. There will be somebody available at 9 who will be a difference maker. So it's really up to the Toronto Raptors to identify that guy and find out who he is, and then bring him aboard and develop him. So I'm interested what you guys have to say, because that is the end of the video. Let me know, who are your sleeper picks for this year's draft? Who do you hope falls to the Toronto Raptors? Who do you think is a booby prize? Who do you think is the guy that if they pick him, it's gonna blow up in their face? Let me know here in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. Always love talking to Toronto Raptors fans. We are the best. And let me know what you think about the playoffs as well. I've been really having a good time watching them this year. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and hit the bell icon, all of that good stuff, because that really helps the algorithm know that this is content that other Raptors fans need to see. So please do that. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.